How are we doing, Soda City Comic-Con? Great to have you here. I'll tell you what, it's been an action-packed day of panels. This next one is quite interesting, especially if you're a big fan of video games. It's the art of performance capture. Who knows what performance capture is? Right? Mocap, I think, is sometimes batted around, but you'll find it's more than just motion. It's a performance, and we've got two rock stars as far as performance capture goes, and I want to bring them to the stage. You've seen them already, but we're happy to see them here again. Adrian Hough and Roger Clark, everyone. Give them a round of applause. Gentlemen.
Hello.
Yeah. Sorry, we're a few minutes getting late here. Roger was indisposed.
It was my fault.
But it's okay. We're here. We're active, we're ready to go. So wow, performance capture, okay? It's not, I mean, in the video game world, it is what it is, but it's not an unfamiliar concept, right? I think, Adrian, you put it best, it's acting. It is absolutely acting, but with just some really weird nuances to it, or if you even want to call them weird. I think in Hollywood and the way things have been done here lately, it's kind of par for the course, but when did you first get your start in doing performance capture specifically?
Well, actually, the first time I did performance capture was in Assassin's Creed 3.
Ah.
I was told it was a mini-series shooting in Montreal. And I thought, that sounds fancy. And so I taped for it, then I got a call back, and they gave me this big, long, huge monologue like the night before. And I was like, okay, kids, you're in bed now. It's 9 o'clock. Go. And then I worked until midnight, and I have to take a ferry to get to where the audition is and the buses and stuff. And I got there, and I thought, okay, on this callback, if they're not hiring Jeremy Irons for this part, or anybody, you know, Julian Sands or somebody, then I'm going to give it. So I just did. In the end, the monologue went great, and I was shaking at the end of it. I felt like, you know, that actosterone you get when you've done. And they said, we'd like to hire you. And no, you never. And I thought, what is this? You know, what's going on here?
Yeah, to hear it in the room, wow.
And they beckoned me to the table, and then I signed this like 40 million page non-disclosure agreement, my left kidney and my firstborn child. And they said, and they said, do you know what this is? And I said, miniseries? And I said, it's Assassin's Creed 3. And I'm sorry, I was not a gamer. I had no clue. And they went, it's a video game. And I went, oh, okay. It was for shame. Anyway.
Yeah, it's funny too, because whenever you audition for them, I was saying yesterday, they're always called Untitled Video Game Project. They all have the same name until you sign the NDA.
Yeah. Then we can give away the company secrets, right? So, so Roger, yours was Red Dead Redemption then, correct?
No.
Or was it even earlier than that?
Yeah, my first foray into the volume, as they call it,
the volume,
was 2006, I think, in the UK, and it was for a small game called Shell Shock 2. So you think Vietnam and zombies, that's it.
Anyone ever played that game in the crowd?
Shell Shock
curious?
2. Oh, there we go. I think it was on the PS2.
Okay.
Yeah. That was a lot of fun, and my mind was blown away. Because typically, like nowadays, when you go into a mocap volume, especially for a video game anyway, there'll be a huge, massive screen up on the wall because it can all be done in real time now, and you see yourself, or your avatar anyway, and you can go, oh, that's what I look like. And that really helps inform the performer. You know, when you know, oh, it's okay, so that's my, for lack of a better term, my digital makeup, you know? And
We had stick figures.
exactly, and that was my first time doing it too. And you can't tell anything from the stick figures, except whether or not it's working. Yeah, but it's changed. It's developed so much in the last 20 years. It first started out, I think in the 80s. They used it for sports research and anatomy studies. Like they would analyze golf swings, and anatomic biology students would use it to figure out the movement of the human body. And then it's progressed, and now we see it. Well, I just saw Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes recently, and that blew my mind. Yeah, my mind.
Wow, that's remarkable. That's absolutely remarkable. So we've come, from stick figures to now pretty much. You want to say full renders, if you will, of the characters? Is even more crude than that?
I think it's safe to say that we can now have performance capture footage side by side with live action, and you can't really tell the difference anymore, can you?
Yeah, no.
Now, both of you, I'm assuming, come from, I know you do, Roger, we talked about that yesterday, coming from a theater background. Adrian, I'm assuming you do as well, right? So when you're doing these, fight scenes, or you're doing stuff with props, weapons, that kind of stuff, does that theatrical experience and perhaps work with like swords and stuff like that, does that all help and come into play for you guys in that case?
Well, absolutely. I mean, the wonderful thing about performance capture in the volume is that, first of all, there's no audience and there's no camera like immediately visible. So you can basically put the audience and the camera anywhere. So there's part of the time during our show, I had this cheeky notion. I said, I wonder if I can control where the camera's going to go. And so there's a scene on the rooftop in Assassin's Creed 3 where it goes, Father, and there's a whole scene, and he does this whole speech about the Continental Congress. And but I mean, I started going back. I trained in the UK. I lived in the UK for 10 years. I worked as a British actor, a Scottish actor, and an Irish actor, opposite the real thing, and felt very cheeky doing it. So in the volume, I started this scene, and we have basically the set is like a taped out area, and I said, well, where are we here? Oh, you're on a rooftop, and there's soldiers down there. Okay, got it. So I'm looking down at the soldiers. So there's a piece of tape which is the center line of the roof. So I had this notion to stand right at the edge of the roof and be looking down and just be having the conversation of my shoulder. So I thought, he's going to be behind me in a two-shot over there, right? And then I'm going to turn at this point. So, and I just wondered if it could work. And actually, you have an incredible amount of control as a performer in the volume, more than you do on a stage and on a film. Anyway.
And they can change the camera in post if they want. I mean, obviously, they wouldn't have in that situation because you set it up so nicely. But oftentimes, there's, for gaming anyway, for Red Dead, there was two major different ways to do it. You're either doing a cutscene, which is much more cinematic, or you're doing in-game animations where the player is still the avatar is still under player control. And the in-game animations can be a lot more harder to anticipate because the player has control where the camera's going to be. So we would have to think about that when we were doing some of the more simple scenes, and we'd have to try to anticipate how awful some of you gamers can be when you're trying to find bugs as well.
How dare you!
So it often came to the point where we would do some of the in-game scenes. We'd have to start them. We wouldn't have to do the whole thing, but we'd have to do the beginning of it like 3 or 4 different times, where I would be entering from 3 or 4 different directions, depending where the player would be coming from. So we had to anticipate that to make it as seamless as possible.
I'm going to give you my microphone real quick and
Am I
change out
cutting
these
in and out?
batteries. Yeah.
How's this? Is this better? Oh my gosh, this is so much better. Oh my God. Yeah, so I've seen the technology advance in the short time that I've been doing it. Gosh, well, it's almost 20 years now. That's crazy. But I just think it's a fascinating medium, and the technology keeps advancing, and that advancement keeps granting the performers more and more freedom, and I think the only limitation really is our imaginations, because we could do, for example, with Red Dead, there's the swamplands of Le Gras in one scene, and then the next day, or the next scene for that, we could be up in Coulter in the snow. And it's the same studio, and all it would really require would be for the set builders to just change the set a bit. And the set would usually just be scaffolding and pipes. I don't know how with Ubisoft, but you only know what you have to interact with,
There's
right?
like little boxes for the ship and a little box where the steering, the steering wheel is a ship and all that stuff, yeah.
Oh my gosh, I remember swimming on some apple boxes, I could, because John Marston can't swim, but Arthur can. Yeah, it's funny, when you take away the facade and you see some of the things, then how we achieved them, you'd laugh, yeah.
That's incredible. So I guess that kind of leads me to another point. Yeah, you don't have physical set pieces, but you may have something that you perhaps have to jump off of, and how much of that can be cheated in mocap, if you will. Like, obviously, for example, you've got a character maybe that's got to jump off a really high cliff or a building or something like that. in reality, what does that look like in the studio? Are we talking maybe a couple of feet and they animate that? Or are you in like maybe some kind of harness rig or something like that that will take you down that full distance?
They can animate that part. I'm an old man now. I don't want to hurt myself. So there is this one scene in Assassin's Creed where I'm trying to unlock a door and Connor gets impatient. And I said, just a minute. And I turn around and Noah Watt, who brilliantly plays Connor in that, just comes right at me and tackles me onto the floor. And we're wearing like the helmets, like the camera on your face here, which is sort of stuck to your head, so everything is behind this camera, and all the dots. And we had to do that to get the timing right, about 8 times.
Ooh.
And being tackled by a young, muscly guy 8 times, not good. And then I just kind of did this. I just kind of went to the floor and went, one of those. And then we had to do the swimming in the water underneath after.
Thankfully, you can cheat it with padding.
Yes.
Yeah, we certainly used a lot of padding, which made us, I was grateful for it because, you could go for it a little more because you knew you weren't going to do yourself an injury, at least typically anyway. But there's so many things like that. But at least, you can jump off 3 feet instead of 300, which is what you guys, we're spoiling it, aren't we? We should keep our mouths shut so that they actually think that we do all that stuff.
So you heard it here. They all jump 300 feet, so tell all your friends.
In the water.
And swimming into water, holding their breath. Their lung capacity is just stellar.
But one thing that I also took away from mocap is that, like on a film set or in theater, your relationship with the director is really key to bringing and putting the story across. And that's also the same for games, but who's also really vitally important, at least for me, were the animators. Because they are almost as important as the director, because so much of the time, the animators are the ones who actually know what the environment is going to look like. Yes. And so often, they'll go, well, here, come on over. And then they'll bring you to a monitor, and they'll show you. And like I said earlier, that is so informative and helpful for the performer, because then you can, now you can know which details that you can incorporate into your acting, and that was vital. The animators really do help out. And I remember doing like in-game animations too. We'd get a take that the director loved, and the director would go, great, take that. And then I'd see the animator coming over and whispering in the director's ear, and I'm like, for God's sake. And then they'd come over and go, Raj, that was great, but you just got to end, when we end the scene, your foot has to be 3 inches more to the left. And I'm like, are you serious? And they're like, yeah. But then as I really learned to understand the animator's needs and requirements, I started to understand why that was important, because that's what seamlessly blends the gameplay, and that's what makes it more interactive and immersive for you guys.
I mean, that's what your jobs are, basically, to kind of bring everybody's vision, effectively make it easier on the directors, the editors, the animators, all of that stuff.
And so much of that stuff now, I don't even need to do it again now. They can just blend it after and post.
Mm-hmm. Can move you over that much.
It's that easy. Don't have to do the retake. You had mentioned earlier kind of, like different angles, having like a camera and everything here. I'm curious to know, just sort of facial expressions. Now, you're wearing a suit that has got a bunch of little dots on it. It makes it easier for the animators and everything to kind of figure that out. Anything specific with the face that gets put on that gets used to kind of help in that expression? Or is that something that is just going to be entirely up to the animators and they don't have to, really worry about it when you're shooting?
Right. Well, in my case, after we rehearsed a little bit, they brought a guy up while we were rehearsing the day, and they had a guy take my picture. And then we did some more stuff, and then they said, would you like to go down and see what your character looks like? So they took me down into the dungeons, through all the security gates where you can't ever escape if you're an animator or a computer guy. And there's this guy who had my picture on next to his monitor, and he was changing the face of the character into my face. And what they did for us, technology-wise, first of all, you've got the dots, but you also have this like bicycle tight helmet on your head, so that they're capturing every single thing that you do with your face, at every moment. We didn't do the dots in those days, so.
No, we didn't do the dots on Red Dead, but I have done the dots in the past. And I know every studio does it slightly differently. Some people do the dots and the camera, but I remember there used to be balls on the face. And that was really tough for a variety of reasons. Because one, you know, you're in character, and you're like, what if it's a hot day and you do that? You're like, oh no, we've lost all the data for your forehead.
Recalibrate.
And then they'd have to recalibrate it and then to get the safe crazy glue out so that it would, and you'd get sweaty and they would just fall off. That was a nightmare. Ooh. But then the dots, like Magic Marker, made it a little bit easier. But then those sweat off as well. But yeah, ultimately we ended up with the face cams. And when we started, our cameras were standard definition, and we ended in HD. But that was a pretty bright light, as I recall, right in your face. It takes a bit of getting used to.
That's wow. That's I mean.
Actually, just one more thing about the cameras. When I started recording Assassin's Creed 3, they had these long, heavy wires coming out of the back of the helmet into the control boxes and all the computers, and this is like a big bundle like this thick.
It's a bit of a toll on your neck, isn't it?
They hired 2 extra people to walk around behind us as we were circling each other, ducking underneath.
Way.
And,
to hold the battery?
But by the end they were remote.
Did you record audio at the same time?
Yes.
Yeah, not a lot of studios do that because they lack the acoustics to do it properly. Yeah. But we also had these really fancy lav mics that they put on the helmet, just like the opera singers on Broadway. Yes. And that's what we used. But again, here's the tricky thing, because when we were doing cutscenes, it wasn't a problem. But when we were doing all the in-game stuff, we couldn't overlap each other's audio. Right. Because the main character could conceivably be anywhere. So your dialogue couldn't pick up on their mic and vice versa. So it would also change the way we performed, because we couldn't speak over each other. And it's really hard to do an argument that way.
It's true.
So nowadays, everything's pretty much all wireless now. You don't have to be tethered to anything. Is that the way I understand it in most cases?
Yeah. Wow. It's advancing so fast.
That's wonderful. Who here just in that has learned something new about performance capture? Isn't that crazy? How many of you have questions about motion capture? I want to kind of open it up to you here and ask some questions about it. Maybe the technique or anything perhaps pertaining to the games you've been a part of, if that's all right, gentlemen.
That's all right.
All right, let's do it.
Sure.
And Lauren's going to come up here with the microphone, and our first question comes here in the center. Yes, sir.
Hey, this is a question for both of you. You had mentioned before how the lack of a live audience or a camera affected your performance. How did that change the way you interacted with other actors while recording all of your parts?
Well, yeah, you're right. The no audience being there makes it very similar to a film set, which is why I was so grateful. And this is one of the things that I think performance capture has an advantage over voice acting with. Because typically when you're doing voice acting, you're almost never performing along with your colleagues. They'll have their session a day after you or a day before. It's usually you reading with the director. But with performance capture, you have the luxury of bouncing off of your colleague. And I think that really helps make those scenes more authentic. So I always embraced that. I always considered that to be a luxury over voice acting. Voice acting has its advantages too, but that was my favorite part about performance capture, is that it was very theatrical or filmic, in that you perform the scene and you bounce off each other.
I mean, you can go inside that performance from theatrical to very subtle. Like you have a whole range of size and intensity that you can play. And actually, for the character of Haytham Kenway, for the first few sessions, I was recording with a different actor than Noah Watt. And Noah Watts, and
that happens a lot.
Oh yeah, and I was just on a roll. I was like, oh, this is easy. I know exactly who this character is. I'm just going to play him straight ahead like this. No one's going to stop me. And then the other guy sort of disappeared, and then suddenly Noah was there, and Noah was like, You know, I was like this train marching through his Haytham Kenway, and he was like this wall. I said, no, you're not going to do that to me. And so suddenly the dynamic between the two of us, like I had to find other ways of maybe winning the scene or winning over or being clever. And it was just, and it affected my performance. So it's just like, you know, working with another actor is such a blessing. Anyway.
It's awesome. And it's true, too, because I think mocap, with performance capture, yes, theatrical performances tend to be a little bigger. You know, you got to make sure the person in the last row can hear you and see you. And film stuff can often afford to be a lot more subtler. But I think performance capture offers both of that. Because you got that face cam 6 inches from your face. That's going to pick up everything your face is doing. So you don't need to be over the top. But then sometimes if it's an in-game animation, you think, well, this could be quite far away from the camera. So you might gesticulate a little bit more. It's the best of both worlds, I think.
The other piece that's theatrical is that you have to do, I don't know if it's still this way, but you couldn't cut in between different takes back in 2011. So like you had to make sure the entire take, and I had like a long speeches and actions to do. You have to do the whole take as one take, and then they'll do another whole take as one take, and that's going to be slightly different. So they couldn't cut in between takes. I don't know if they can do that now or not.
They can, but yeah, you're right. I remember. No, it's crazy what they can do now. Now they can, if you like the first half of the first take and the second half of the second take, unless it's totally different, most of them can blend it in now. It's crazy.
God, you're so lucky, so spoiled.
I know. That is a luxury, because I do remember it that way too. And you always, it's the last 30 seconds, you're like, let's not screw it up.
Nearly there.
Yeah.
No pressure, but yeah. All right, next question, right over here on this side. Yes, sir.
All right, so y'all have been commenting on the differences between theater, mocap, and film. So I'm curious, how was it getting used to those differences? How difficult was it?
Was it a difficult transition from theater and stage to performance capture to?
It's funny, you know, when we were on Red Dead, we had a cast of like about 1,000 people, and that's not counting just the voice actors. We had about 1,000 people putting on mocap suits, and about probably 85% of them had never done it before. And some of them didn't even know. They thought it was a voice acting gig. Some of them didn't even learn their lines until they're getting in the car on the way there. And like, yeah, you got to be off page for this. This ain't in a booth. And like, oh, shoot. But every time someone new, it was always the same thing. So like I said before, it would be a fairly large volume studio and there's a big screen on the wall showing what it actually looks like. And they would always do the same thing, because they always feel a little self-conscious because they're wearing Lycra, and there's no secrets with Lycra. And they'd walk in, and then they'd see themselves up on the thing, and they'd go, what? No way. That is amazing. And then we'd sit around and watch them do that for 5 minutes, getting used to it.
Hey, new guy.
And then within about, you could get 5 or 6 takes in, and then it's amazing how quickly they could, once they grasp it, it didn't take that long. It really didn't. It was amazing.
For me, I was just terrified of screwing it up, but I was determined to use every single bit of my skill and imagination to create this world and make it as real and emotionally truthful and all the actor stuff as possible. Wow. So, I mean, I think, so yeah, you do get used to it, and then suddenly you have the driver's controls, you know?
Right. All right, we got time for one more question, and that's going to come in the very back. Oh, yes.
What was your favorite moment with being Arthur Morgan or throughout the creation of Arthur Morgan?
My favorite moment, you know, what I always really enjoyed was when it was the whole gang together. You know, we worked on it for so long that we got to know each other fairly well. We became our own gang in real life because all those big group scenes were done together. So I always liked it when it was the whole gang, and particularly when they're celebrating, because that doesn't often happen in the game. I like it when they rescue Sean. and there's that big party there. And I also like when you rescue Jack, and there's the big party there. Those were my favorite bits.
And Adrian, I'll ask you the same question, but about Assassin's Creed 3.
Oh God, I'm just trying to decide. It's probably in the rooftop scene, or so many. But I'll just pick. I have to pick one because there was not a scene I didn't like. Working with Noah on the rooftop scene and getting through that whole speech and having him reject me at the end, and it's one of those wonderful actor moments between two actors, and the rooftop scene, or the scene where he finds out, you are my son after all, and or the death scene or when we have to fight at the end, and then he kills me, and I have this little death speech to him, and then I think the last line is, I should have killed you long ago.
Ooh.
Claps.
Ominous, right? Gentlemen, thank you so much for coming out here and talking with this has
Thank you.
This has been very enlightening. I have learned, and I hope that's the goal of these panels, is to come away with something maybe you didn't know that you can have a little bit of institutional knowledge of, and I think you guys have done just that. So thanks so much. Adrian and Roger, ladies and gentlemen, give them a round of applause.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much.
Come on over to our tables.
Yes.
Over at the tables.
Yeah.
I will say, if you have a young child and they are dressed up, at 3:30 will be the kids cosplay contest. That's always a huge hit, right? So get them entered. That's going to be coming up here at 3:30. In the meantime, they're going to be signing pictures, doing all the great stuff. Thank you again, gentlemen. I appreciate you.
Attention. 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 Attention.
Get ready, South Carolina. Meet your favorite comic book legends, pose with iconic characters, and dive into exclusive panels that will blow your mind. Join us at the Myrtle Beach Convention Center for 2 action-packed days. Whether you're a superhero or superfan, this is your convention. Boardwalk Comic-Con, where fandom comes alive. Surf's Up Comic-Con,